When an agent actually knows the numbers better than you do, you have to find a different reason to have people trust you. So it's somewhat of an identity shift in addition to a workflow shift. And the way things can go wrong also completely changes as well. AI is really fast. It's mostly right. But when it's wrong, it's going to be wrong confidently and often everywhere at once. That keeps me up a little bit.
Just like the slides you get before a big meeting, the pre-read prepares you, CFOs, and other executives for the next big thing. It's the global podcast where finance, sustainability, audit, and risk teams come together in the C-suite.
If you're making decisions at scale or need to understand the leaders who are, you're in the right place. This is the pre-read, brought to you by Workiva.
I'm Steve Soder, accounting enthusiast and Diet Coke aficionado.
And I'm Melissa Zucker, sustainability nerd and equal opportunist caffeine addict.
Today, we're talking about the future of the CFO. Look, in 2035, their name is still going on the 10K, but agents will probably be producing most of the work underneath it.
And the gap between what they're signing off on and what they can actually verify is about to get a whole lot wider. That's why we sat down with Workiva CFO Barbara Larson to talk about the importance of human judgment and why finance leaders we need in 10 years might not be the ones that we're actually building today.
Barbara also shared a unique and candid view into her first 6 months as Workiva's CFO. So, Alyssa, what stood out to you from our chat?
Okay, I have two big ones that stood out for me. The first was when we were talking about building trust with the board and the audit committee. Barbara said that the title of CFO gets you in the room. That's it. And that actually really stuck with me, right? Because trust has to be built on judgment calls. And the CFOs who break through are the ones that aren't explaining problems after the fact, but are actually surfacing them before they become issues. The second thing was really all about speed and how it's no longer a differentiator. Finance teams have long proven themselves through fast closes and fast answers. But when agents can now match that pace, what remains is knowing when the model is right, yet somehow the answer is still wrong, and knowing when to slow down when everyone around you wants to go faster. Steve, what stood out to you?
Well, Barbara's exactly right. Using my title as accounting enthusiast and Diet Coke aficionado generally does not get me in the room. But as for our conversation with her, she talked a lot about AI potentially being wrong at scale. I mean, look, one person making a mistake, that's manageable, and you've got controls generally to identify that. But an agent being wrong may actually end up being wrong everywhere and all at once. So the CFO's accountability doesn't actually shrink as automation expands. The CFO's accountability actually compounds. The second thing she brought up is something that everybody's been talking about, but that the talent pipeline risk, in her view, is actually underestimated. Finance leaders build their judgment by doing the work, right? Closing the books, building models, and, sitting in the chair long enough to be able to know when to push back on something. But if an agent does all of that work, well, then the next generation may be skilled at directing AI, but they may not be able to recognize when something breaks or properly use human judgment. And I think that's a really big deal.
Could not agree more, Steve. So with that, let's go to our conversation with Barbara. Let's talk like day one reality. I imagine you had a bit of a plan walking into Workiva, and I'm curious how much of that original plan survived contact with the actual job now that you've been here.
I had a plan. I was really, really proud of that plan, but I will say the plan did not really survive past probably week one. The core held, like understanding the business, figuring out where the team is really strong, making sure I was building relationships before I started moving things around. That part I would definitely do the same again. But what I didn't plan on is just how fast my calendar would fill up. Like week one was our sales kickoff event. I started at Fuse, which was an absolutely great way to join the company. But by week two, I was already deep in earnings and board prep, strategizing on capital allocation, and then all the one-on-ones that filled my calendar. So that quiet window just to kind of sit back and observe, it was much shorter than I thought it was going to be. So I realized pretty fast that things just don't happen in order. You start making calls before you feel ready, and getting comfortable with good enough to move really became my standard a lot sooner than I expected.
So Barbara, I feel like most finance leaders in the manner of speaking can kind of work around their reporting infrastructure. When I was a controller, and this was not the right attitude, but I kind of prided myself in not spending time in the GL. Like if I had to be in the GL, like something was absolutely like wrong. But now like you're in the C-suite of the company that is building those tools. That's got to be different. I mean, tell us what's that like?
I will say that is a genuinely wonderful part of the job, and one of the top reasons that I came to Workiva. I'm not getting kind of that customer experience secondhand through, from our sales team or customer success. I actually live it through each and every one of our cycles, whether it's close or the forecast, or I'm just trying to understand some of our business trends. So there's no hiding either in terms of, if a workflow's clunky, I know if something isn't reconciling cleanly, I definitely feel it. My team knows I feel it. But honestly, I think it's been a gift. It's one of the reasons I'm here at Workiva. I think a lot of CFOs are several layers removed from what the product actually does. And I get a really direct read, and it definitely makes me more credible in product conversations and probably an even more annoying customer. Both are probably true.
Well, we do like to always consider Workiva as customer one. So are you saying that you're annoying customer one? I can't possibly believe that.
I might be. You'll have to check with the product team on that one.
Well, I want to shift from product and let's go back to being people-centric. I want to talk about earning trust up the chain. A lot of board relationships and audit committee cadences, they don't build themselves. And so how did you approach that in the first 6 months? And what did you feel that you really had to earn versus what kind of comes with the title?
I think the one thing that nobody really says out loud is, the title gets you in the room for sure, but that's it. Trust is something that is completely separate, and you have to work on and earn. Take the audit committee, for example, they are expecting clean process, no surprises, clear risk language. That's all just assumed. It's table stakes. But what actually builds the relationship is the judgment. So being the person who brings the problem before it becomes a headline, not the person who comes in and does a really good job of explaining it well afterwards. Of course, they've seen lots of CFOs. They know the difference faster than you'd think. And as I think about the broader board, so beyond the audit committee, it's really trying to understand what each person actually cares about beyond just their committee role. Like what's keeping them up at night about this company specifically. When you know that, you stop being someone that they just hear from in board meetings, and you start being someone that they actually want to talk to or they go to when they're trying to get insight into what's going on at the company.
I love that. And it's almost like when you've sort of like broken through into where like, okay, now we have a relationship. You know what I mean? Like now there's like a little bit of a dialogue as opposed to this like sort of one-way communication. It's almost like, okay, now I'm making progress. It's almost like that reinforcement there. Barbara, what's maybe the one thing you wish someone had told you before day one, maybe about the culture, the pace, things like decision grade data? We use the terminology quite a bit at Workiva. And maybe for our audience, what can they learn from someone who, like you, is starting a new role?
It's a really, really great question. I think the thing that nobody told me, and looking back, I wish they had, is every company has a different definition of good enough data to make a decision. And you kind of walk into a new company thinking that current standard they have is maybe wrong. And maybe it is, but you have to learn it first and challenge it second. Otherwise, you're going to be picking battles that aren't the real issue and burning goodwill that you actually need. So it all goes back to building trust. On culture, I think specifically understanding and watching how fast people move. What is the general pace of the company? I think pace is going to tell you a lot more about a company than anything you're reading about their values. So get a read on a company's pace and speed very early on. That's always really important. And then I think from a practical perspective, and I'll think in kind of finance lingo, but your first 90 days are mostly deposits, building credits. So you need to make sure that you are making a lot of them, because the withdrawals or the debits will definitely come later.
I love the use of debits. Thank you.
Debits and credits.
That's right. Just warms my heart. Left side, right side.
Not every conference has a keynote that stops you mid-scroll. This one does. Join us in Las Vegas this September for Workiva Amplify, where CEO Julie Iskow sits down with the Julia Roberts for a candid conversation about leading under scrutiny, making high-stakes decisions, and building trust with an audience of millions. Turns out, that last part translates pretty well to the work you do every day. And that's just one keynote in a 3-day program covering governed AI, reporting, regulation, and technology. It's not one you'll want to walk out on. You'd have to be running a pretty elaborate con to justify skipping this one. Register now at workiva.com/PR-amplify. That's workiva.com/PR-AMPLIFY. Workiva.com/PR-amplify. And we'll see you in Las Vegas.
Okay, so let's look in our crystal ball a little bit and say it's the year 2035, right? And we're in the world of AI everywhere. You're still going to be sharing the results and signing the 10K, but it's likely AI agents that are producing most of the work. So how does that change what it means to actually lead a finance organization?
All right, 2035. That seems like a long ways out, but it'll be here before we know it. And the job really shifts from doing to directing and deciding, which I think it sounds really simple, but it's not. A lot of finance leaders, including myself, they build credibility by just knowing the numbers cold. When an agent actually knows the numbers better than you do, you have to find a different reason to have people trust you. So it's somewhat of an identity shift in addition to a workflow shift. And the way things can go wrong also completely changes as well. AI is really fast. It's mostly right. But when it's wrong, it's going to be wrong confidently and often everywhere at once. So that's a very, very different problem than just one person making a mistake. So as you said, like my name is still going to be on the 10K full stop. So if anything, the weight of that grows because the gap between what I can actually verify and what I'm signing off on is going to get wider. And, you know, that keeps me up a little bit thinking about what that world will look like in 2035.
Let's make that anxiety worse.
Come on. You're supposed to be helping me, Steve.
I'm sorry. But, you know, when you think about that likely notion that agents are going to continue to do more and more work, then, you know, it seems to follow that human judgment becomes a more and more precious resource. So now, Barbara, like, how would you think about building a team that kind of treats human judgment as precious instead of maybe the sort of old paradigm that, well, that's actually a bit of a bottleneck, or we sort of want to eliminate that for the purposes of speed? How do you sort of like switch that to go the other direction 10 years from now and like, hey, we could have an agent do everything if we were willing to trust it?
Yeah, you're right. Speed has always been how finance teams prove themselves. I mean, we talk about it on my team. Speed with soul, fast close, fast model, fast answer. And that'll go away as a differentiator. And some people are going to have a hard time with that. So what do you have left? Judgment. Knowing when the model's right, but the answer is still wrong for a certain situation. And most importantly, knowing when to slow down when everybody wants to go faster. You can't automate those two things. So hiring people that will actually raise their hand and tell me when I'm wrong, and I try to actually mean it. So if the culture isn't backing it up, you just get people who are politely wrong in meetings.
If only we could all be just politely wrong if we're going to be wrong. You know, if agents are doing the work, I imagine you're not going to agree with this premise, but some would say that the finance team is redundant. And so, you know, first my question is, what's your answer to that? And maybe building on this idea of human judgment being the truly precious resource, assuming there is a version of your team that remains, you know, what does that look like, the part that can't be replaced?
If you have parts of your team today that, you know, their sole role is, you know, moving data or producing reports, agents, honestly, they're going to be able to do that better. But what agents can't do is have those real relationships with the business, navigate a room or a meeting or a conversation when things get complicated or there are complicated problems to solve, standing in front of an investor and being credible and actually being the person that's accountable when something goes sideways. Those are all still very much human jobs. The finance team I want in 2035 is likely smaller, higher caliber, with a lot more running on autopilot underneath the cover. So a bigger scope, but a different shape. And I think CFOs owe it to their teams to have those honest conversations about what that means, because some roles in finance are going to look very different in the future in 2035.
And, you know, as we think about 2035 and we think about some of those risks, Barbara, do you have a sense for, you know, maybe what risk might barely register on anybody's radar today, but that, you know, everybody is going to be talking about, everybody's going to have it in their risk management plans in 10 years, in 2035?
I think one that's probably not getting enough airtime right now is if you have agents that are doing analytical work, then where does the next generation of finance leaders actually learn? Like, my path to CFO ran through years of doing the work myself, building models, closing the books, sitting in the details long enough to develop that real intuition of knowing when to push back on a number. And so that's all about judgment and how judgment gets built. It's not something that you could just read about. So if all of that work disappears, we're going to lose some sort of training ground. And we might not notice for a while, but the people in senior seats today still have those muscles. And years from now, we've got a generation of finance leaders that are great at directing agents, but they have no idea what to do when something breaks. You know, that is something that is top of mind for me. And, you know, I don't think anyone right now has a clear answer, but it's a conversation that finance orgs should be having, and most probably aren't. So how do we groom that next generation of great finance leaders, and where do we get that talent from?
Thank you again to our guest, Barbara Larson, and thank you for listening.
This has been The Pre-Read, brought to you by Workiva, the world's only unified platform for financial reporting, sustainability, audit, and risk.
We've got more insights and hot takes coming your way, so be sure to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your edge.
If you liked the show, leave a review. Send it to someone you love, or just shout it out on your next team call.
We'll see you next time, and until then, go lead it like you mean it.
I'm Melissa Zucker, and that's Steve Soder. Our lead producer is Mike Ravagno, with audio engineering by Faith Springer and Tanner Heinrichs.
Pedro Sousa is our graphic designer. Transcripts are created and edited by Courtney Kimsey. And thanks to our digital and social team, Mike Berg, Katie Carr, and Michael Karnowski.